Good morning, friends. Today we are going to take up one more talk of Swamiji. It's called Practical Vedanta, Part 3. In the series of 4 talks Swamiji gave on Practical Vedanta, this is the third part. This was delivered in London on 17th November 1896. Swamiji is, through examples of Upanishads, giving a very interesting and to the point answers to the questions what many of us we do ask. What Swamiji is saying, let us start. Swamiji is saying in the Chandogya Upanishad, we read that a sage called Narada came to another called Sanat Kumara and asked him various questions, of which one was, if religion was the cause of things as they are. And Sanat Kumara leads him, as it were, step by step, telling him that there is something higher than this earth, and something higher than that, and so on and so forth, till he comes to Akasha, ether. Ether is higher than light because in it the ether are the sun and the moon, lightning and the stars. In ether we live and ether we die. Then the question arises, if there is anything higher than that, and Sanat Kumara tells him of prana. This prana, according to the Vedanta, is the principle of life. It is like ether, an omnipresent principle, and all motion, either in the body or anywhere else, is the work of this prana. It is greater than Akasha, and through it everything lives. Prana is the mother, the father, it is in the sister, in teacher, and prana is the knower, everything. Swami is giving another example. He is saying, Shvetagatu asks his father about the truth, and the father teaches him different things, and concludes by saying, that which is the fine cause in all these things, of it are all those things made. That is the all, and that is the truth. Thou art that, O Shvetagatu. And then he gives various examples. The examples is beautiful examples. Let's go through that one by one. As a bee, O Shvetagatu, gathers honey from different flowers, and as the different honeys do not know that they are from various trees and from various flowers, so all of us, having come to the existence, know not that we have done so. Now, that which is that subtle essence, in it all that exists has itself. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Shvetagatu, are that. He gives another example of the rivers running down to the ocean. As the rivers, when they are in the ocean, do not know that they have been various rivers. Even so, when we come out of that existence, we do not know that we are that. O Shvetagatu, thou art that. So on it goes with his teachings. Now, there are two principles of knowledge. Beautifully, Swamiji is explaining this with a very clear-cut logic. The one principle is that we know by referring the particular to the general and the general to the universal. And the second is that anything of which the explanation is sought is to be explained so far as possible from its own nature. Taking up the first principle, we see that all our knowledge really consists of classifications, going higher and higher. When something happens singly, we are, as it were, dissatisfied. When it can be shown that same thing happens again and again, then we are satisfied and we call it law. Like the example Swami is giving, beautifully, the laws of gravitation. How? When we find that one apple falls, we are dissatisfied. But when we find that all apples fall, and we call it the law of gravitation, we are very satisfied. The fact is that from the particular we deduce the general. When we want to study religion, we should apply this scientific process. The same principle holds good here, and in fact, we find that has been the method all through. In reading these books from which I have been translating to you, the earliest idea that I can trace is the principle of going from the particular to the general. Swami is giving this. We see how the bright ones become merged into one principle. And likewise in the ideas of the cosmos, we find the ancient thinkers going higher and higher. From the fine elements, they go to the finer and more embracing elements. And from these particulars, they come to the one omnipresent ether. And from that, even they go to an all-embracing force or prana. And through all this runs the principle, and that one is not separate from the others. It is the very ether that exists in the higher form of prana. the ether, higher form of prana concretes, so to say, and it becomes ether. And that ether becomes. The generation of the personal God is another case in point. We have seen how this generation was reached and how was called the sum total of all consciousness. But a difficulty arises. It is an incomplete generation. We take up only one side of the facts of nature, the fact of consciousness, and upon that we generalize, but the other side is left out. So in the first place, it is a defective generation. There is another insufficiency, and that relates to the second principle. Everything should be explained from its own nature. There may have been people who thought that every apple that fell to the ground was dragged down by a ghost, but the explanation is the law of gravitation. And although we know it is not a perfect explanation, yet it is much better than the other, because it is derived from the nature of the thing itself, while the other posed an extraneous cause. So throughout the whole range of our knowledge, the explanation which is based upon the nature of the thing itself is a scientific explanation, and an explanation which brings it in outside agent is unscientific. So the explanation of a personal God as a creator of the universe has to stand that test. If that God is outside of nature, having nothing to do with the nature, and this nature is the outcome of the command of that God and produced from nothing, it is a very unscientific theory. And this has been the weak point of every theistic religion throughout the ages. These two defects we find in it, what is generally called the theory of monotheism, the theory of personal God, and with all the qualities of a human being multiplied very much, who, by his will, created this universe out of nothing, and yet is separate from it. This leads us into two difficulties. As you have seen, it is not a sufficient generalization, and secondly, it is not an explanation of nature from nature. It holds that the effect is not the cause, and that the cause is entirely separate from the effect. Yet all human knowledge shows that the effect is but the cause in another form. To this idea, the discoveries of modern science are tending every day, and the latest theory that has been accepted on all sides is the theory of evolution, the principle of which is that the effect is but the cause in another form, a readjustment of the cause, and the cause takes the form of the effect. The theory of creation out of nothing would be laughed by the modern scientist. Now, can religion stand these tests? If there be any religious theories which can stand these two tests, they will be acceptable to the modern mind, to the thinking mind. Any other theory which we ask the modern man to believe on the authority of priests or churches or books, he is unable to accept, and the result is a hideous mass of unbelief. Even in whom there is an external display of belief, in their hearts there is a tremendous amount of unbelief. The rest think and shrink away from religion, as it were, give it up, regarding it as a priestcraft only. Swami is giving very examples which are still valid even after 125 years. And modern man, of today's man, thinks the same way. So his messages are very, very universal and is valid for all the time. Let's see what he's saying now. Swami is saying religion has been reduced to a sort of national form. It is one of our very best social remnants. Let it remain. But the real necessity which the grandfather of the modern man felt for it is gone. He no longer finds it satisfactory to his reason. The idea of such a personal God and such a creation, the idea which is generally known as monotheism in every religion, cannot hold its own very longer. In India, it could not hold its own because of the Buddhists, and that was the very point where they gained their victory in ancient times. They showed that if you allow the nature is possessed of infinite power, and that nature can work over all its wants, it is simply unnecessary to insist that there is something beside nature. Even the soul is unnecessary. The discussion about substance and qualities is very old, and you will sometimes find that the old superstitious lives lives even at the present day. Most of you have read now, during the Middle Ages, and Swami is saying, I am sorry to say, even much later, this was one of the subjects of discussion, whether qualities adhered to the substance, whether length, breadth and thickness adhered to the substance, which we call dead matter, whether the substance remaining, the qualities are there or not. To this, Our Buddhist says, I quote, "You have no ground for maintaining the existence of such a substance. The qualities are all that exist. We do not see beyond them." Unquote. This is just the position of most of our modern agnostics. For it is this fight of the substance and qualities that on a higher plane takes the form of the fight between noumenon and phenomenon. There is a phenomenal world, the universe of continuous change, and there is something behind which does not change. And this duality of existence, noumenon and phenomenon, some hold is true, and others with better reasons claim that you have no right to admit the two, for what we see, feel and think is only the phenomenon. You have no right to assert that there is anything beyond phenomenon, and there is no answer to this. The only answer we get is from the monistic theory of the Vedanta. It is true that only one exists, and that one is either phenomenon or noumenon. It is not true that there are two, something changing and in and out throughout, something which does not change, but is the one and the same thing which appears as changing and which is in reality unchangeable. We have come to think of the body and the mind and soul as many, but really there is only one, and that one is appearing in all these various forms. Take the well-known illustration of the monist, the rope appearing as the snake. Some people in the dark or through some other cause mistake this rope for the snake, but when knowledge comes, the snake vanishes and is found to be a rope. By this illustration, we see that when the snake exists in the mind, the rope has vanished, and when the rope exists, the snake has vanished. A beautiful example Swamiji is giving, which is very true. When we see phenomenon and phenomenon only around us, the noumenon has vanished. But when we see the noumenon, the unchangeable, it naturally follows that the phenomenon has vanished. Now we understand better the position of both the realist and the idealist. The realist says the phenomenon only, and the idealist looks to the monism. For the idealist, the really genuine idealist who has truly arrived at the power of perception, whereby he can get away from all ideas of change. For him, the changeful universe has vanished, and he has the right to say it is all delusion, there is no change. The realist at the same time looks at the changeful. For him, the unchangeable has vanished, and he has a right to say this is all real. What is the outcome of this philosophy? It is that the idea of personal God is not sufficient. You have to get to something higher, to the impersonal idea. It is the only logical step that we can take. Not that the personal idea would be destroyed by that. Not that we supply proof that the personal God does not exist. But we must go to the impersonal for the explanation of the personal. For the impersonal is much higher generalization than the personal. The impersonal only can be infinite. The personal is limited. Thus we preserve the personal and do not destroy it. Often the doubt comes to us that if we arrive at the idea of impersonal God, the personal will be destroyed. If we arrive at the idea of impersonal man, the personal will be lost. But the Vedantic idea is not the destruction of the individual, but its real preservation. We cannot prove the individual by any other means but by referring to the universal, by proving that this individual is really the universal. If we think of the individual as separate from everything else in this universe, it cannot stand a minute. Such a thing never existed. Secondly, by the application of the second principle, that the explanation of everything must come out of the nature of the thing, we are led to a still bolder idea, and one more difficult to understand. It is nothing less than that this impersonal being, our highest generation, is in itself and ourselves, and we are that. O Satyagatu, thou art that. That's what the Swamiji said. You are that impersonal being, that God for whom we have been searching all over the universe is all the time yourself. Yourself not in the personal sense, but in the impersonal sense. The man we know now, the manifested, is personalized, but the reality of this is the impersonal. To understand the personal, we have to refer to the impersonal. The particular must be referred to the general, and that impersonal is the truth, the self of man. Beautifully, Swamiji is deducting logically, which will be very appealing to our modern thinking man. We all are very clever. We try to understand things in our own senses, and if you follow Swamiji, you'll be able to understand very clearly, and the clarity is given clearly. There will be various questions in connection with this, and I shall try to answer them as we go on. Many difficulties will arise, but first let us clearly understand the position of monism. Swami is giving clarity on our, which is possibly some of us ask question. As manifested beings, we appear to be separate, but our reality is one, and the less we think of ourselves as separate from that one, the better for us. The more we think of ourselves as separate from the whole, the more miserable we become. From this monistic principle, we get at the basis of ethics. And I venture to say that we cannot get any ethics from anywhere else. We know that the oldest idea of ethics was the will of some particular being or beings, but few are ready to accept that now, because it would only partial generalization. The Hindus say we must not do this or that because the Vedas say so. But the Christian is not going to obey the authority of the Vedas. The Christian says you must do this and not do that because the Bible says so. That will not be binding on those who do not believe in the Bible. But we must have a theory which is large enough to take in all these various grounds. Just as there are millions of people who are ready to believe in a personal creator, so there have been also thousands of the brightest minds in this world who felt that such ideas were not sufficient for them and wanted something higher. And wherever religion was not broad enough to include all these minds, the result was that the brightest minds in society were always outside of religion. And never was this so marked as at the present time, especially in Europe, all this time. Even now also it can be seen in many of these parts of the different parts of the countries and the world. To include those minds, therefore, religion must become broad enough. Everything it claims must be judged from the standpoint of reason. Why religions should claim that they are not bound to abide by the standpoint of reason, no one knows. If one does not take the standard of reason, there cannot be any true judgment. Even in the case of religion, one religion may ordain something very hideous. For instance, Swami is giving an example to make this point clear. He is saying the Mohammedan religion allows Mohammedan to kill all who are not of their religion. It is clearly stated in the Quran. What is that? Kill the infidels if they do not become Mohammedans. They must be put to fire and sword. Now if we tell a Mohammedan that this is wrong, he will naturally ask, how do you know that? How do you know it is not good? My book says so. If you say your book is older, they will become the Buddhist, and they say my book is much older still. Then will come the Hindus and say my books are the oldest of all. Therefore, reference to books will not do. Who is the standard by which you can compare? How will you say? Look at the Sermon on the Mount, and the Mohammedan will reply, look at the ethics of the Quran. The Mohammedans say, who is the arbiter as to which is better of the two? Neither the New Testament nor the Quran can either be the arbiter in a quarrel between them. There must be some independent authority, and that cannot be any book, but something which is universal, and that is which is more universal than the reason. It has been said that reason is not strong enough. It does not always help us to get to the truth. Many times it makes mistakes, and therefore the conclusion is that we must believe in the authority of a church. That is said to me by a Roman Catholic, but I could not see the logic of it. On the other hand, I should say if a reason be so weak, a body of priests would be weaker. I am not going to accept their verdict, but I will abide by my reason, because with all its weakness there is some chance of my getting at truth through it, while by other means there is no such hope at all. So we should therefore follow reasons and also sympathize with those who do not come to any sort of belief following reasons. For it is better that mankind should become atheist by following reasons than blindly believe in 200 millions of gods on the authority of anybody. What we want is progress, development, realization. No theories have ever made them men higher. No amount of books can help us become the purer. The only power is in realization, and that lies in ourselves and comes from thinking. Let man think. A clod of earth never thinks, but it remains only a lump of earth. The glory of man is that he is a thinking being. It is the nature of man to think, and therein he differs from animals. I believe in reason and follow reason, having seen enough of the evils of authority, for I was born in a country where they have gone to the extreme of authority. That's what Swami is giving very example. He is saying the Hindus believe that creation has come out of the Vedas. How do you know there is a cow? Because the word cow is in Vedas. How do you know there is a man outside? Because the word man is there. If it had not been, there would have been no man outside. That is what they say. Authority with a vengeance. And it is not studied as I have studied it, but some of the most powerful minds have taken it up and spun out wonderful logical theories around it. They have reasoned it out, and there it stands, a whole system of philosophy. And thousands of the brightest intellects have dedicated through thousands of years to the working out of this theory. Such has been the power of authority, and great are the dangers thereof. It stunts the growth of humanity, and we must not forget that we want growth. Even in all relative truth, more than the truth itself, we want the exercise. That is our life. So I am just saying, the monistic theory has this merit that it is the most rational of all the religious theories that we can conceive of. Every other theory, every conception of God which is partial and little and personal is not rational. Yet, monism has this grandeur that it embraces all this partial conception of God as being necessary for many. Some people say this personal explanation is irrational, but it is consoling. They want a consoling religion, and we understand that it is necessary for them. The clear light of truth, very few in this life can bear, much less live up to. It is necessary, therefore, that this comfortable religion should exist. It helps many souls to a better one. Small minds whose circumference is very limited and which require little things to build them up never venture into so high in thought. Their conceptions are very good and helpful to them, even if only little gods and symbols. But you have to understand the impersonal, for it is in and through that alone that these others can be explained. Take for instance the idea of personal God. A man who understands and believes in the impersonal, like John Stuart Mill, for example, may say that a personal God is impossible and cannot be proved. Swamiji is saying, I admit with him that a personal God cannot be demonstrated, but he is the highest reading of the impersonal that can be reached by the human intellect. And what else is the universe? Various readings of the absolute. It is like a book before us, and each one of us brought his intellect to read it, and each one of us to read it himself.